Hey, Strong Girls. I'm Molly Herford, sports journalist, ultra runner, cyclist, and author, and founder of Strong Girl Publishing.
And I'm Dr. Sasha Golish, Executive Director of Yellow Running Shoes, a researcher, engineer, elite runner, and your BFF who's breaking down the science of smashing barriers in women's sports.
Think of us as the intersection of science and culture for women and girls in sport. Each week, we'll dissect the latest headlines and cutting-edge research on female athletes.
Debunk myths about girls in sport. Talk about how hormones affect performance at every age, to the latest research in sports science around mental performance, nutrition, equipment, and so much more.
And we'll spotlight badass girls and women who are rewriting the rules of the game, sometimes literally.
Expect it to be nerdy.
And occasionally TMI.
But it will always be honest.
Whether you're a strong girl yourself or you're raising one, this show is for you. Welcome to Strong Girl Talk,
where sports science meets.
Hello. Welcome back to Strong Girl Talk with me, Molly Herford, and my dear friend, Dr. Sasha Golish. Sasha, how are you doing today? I feel like you have been all over the place lately. Every time I talk to you, there's like something new going on. So what's going on?
Doesn't sit still. I think that should. Hello, I'm Doctor Does Not Sit Still.
Which is very bad for someone who just had knee surgery. Side note.
Okay, you're not wrong. I did get on an airplane 2 weeks post-op. Not my surgeon definitely said do not do that. But I took my mother's advice, and she's an anesthesiologist, so she's also a physician. She's like, yeah, if you can walk, it'll be fine. And I was going to the SPIN Summit, so the Canadian Sport Innovation Summit. It's all doctors and sports scientists. Like, I was in good company.
Okay, how was it?
Going out to the mountains is always amazing. I said this to Rob coming home. I think I could live in Canmore. Like, I think I get why people love it there. I mean, I can never leave my family just because my family's leaving you, but I could totally live in the mountains. It was great to connect with people. I totally met and fangirled. We talked about Dr. Ruth Chinta last week. And, you know, I'm a fangirl on her because, like, decision-making process, right? As a sports scientist, as an engineer, like, I just loved her decision-making process. And it was really awesome to see how she's brought that decision-making process to mental health and mental performance in the Canadian sports system. So it's not just one person saying, like, go, no, go, but that we're upstanders and looking out for each other and really ensuring people are, you know, ready to compete.
Yes, I love it. And I mean, speaking of which, so we did mention her in our episode that was about sex testing in world athletics. And I think both of us were so nervous releasing our first emergency episode, but I have been so happy with how it was received and just that people seem to actually understand the nuance and like the need for discussion around it and stuff. So yeah, thank you everyone who listened to that and who shared it for sure.
Well, and, you know, the other person, you know, that I met there was Dr. Jeremy Shepard, and he really talked about being collaborative and being kind, but not nice. And I think that's really how we addressed that episode, right? We addressed it through a lens of kindness and holding people accountable, but in an upstander way, not a calling out kind of way.
Ooh, I like kind, but not nice. I would put that on a t-shirt.
I'm kind, but I'm not nice. Actually, we should go to Nice and stand on the rock beaches and be like, I'm kind, but I'm not Nice.
Just in Nice.
Okay, so you're off in California. You are in one of your husband's favorite places. Tell us about that.
Yes, I am in Ojai, California, which is like kind of hippie central still. Like it's a very, like they still have actually our favorite like kombucha bar. I feel like really sets the scene for how I feel about this place. I love it. So yeah, we're here for a couple days. Then we head up to Sea Otter. So first of all, apologies for any background noise on my end because this is, I swear, the last episode that we are recording in the van. So after this, we will be in a house, in a studio. Everything will be great again. But for now, this is the on the road edition. But yeah, I'm excited for Sea Otter Classic. So for anyone who's not in cycling, it's sort of the biggest bike festival event expo that the US has anymore. And it's huge. It happens every year. It's so much fun. It feels like summer camp mixed with like a high school reunion for people who are like in the cycling scene. So I'm excited and I'm planning on asking a lot of the brands kind of like the hard questions of like, what are you doing on the women's side of things? Where do you see the women's side of things going? So I think we'll probably have some kind of like compilation episode with probably some stammering from some people, but I think hopefully some good stuff.
Oh, I love that. I mean, we should totally dive into the cycling results. But one of the things I also talked about with people last week, so I met the woman who's the CMO of the PWHL, and we were talking about hockey skates, right? Like hockey skates, like is the blade attached in a way that like works with female physiology? And so all these questions to your point about equipment and asking, can somebody please also make me a saddle where like I don't get off wanting to kill the world? Can I have shoes that don't hurt my feet, my very long, skinny feet? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the less we say about cycling kit sizing, the better.
Good point. You make a very good point. Okay, so you're on the road. So presumably, I mean, given my current lack of well, walking on the treadmill counts as exercise, but did you watch any of it this weekend?
Of course not. No, we have zero TV access. It's very difficult. But I'm lying. We actually watched some of the mountain biking
Okay.
because you can make time for short track. It's only 20 minutes, so you can stream that no matter where you are. So we did check
Aeroshock.
out some of that. Oh my gosh. Arisha, that was such a fun short track race to watch. You have this in the notes, but like seeing Evie Richards will never give a bad post-race interview. Her just enthusiasm for cycling. I love that it's been 10 years of winning races, but every time it seems like it's the first race she's won. She's so stoked on
Oh,
it.
agreed. And talk about someone who has fun playing sports, right? I posted, on the yellow running shoes Instagram. I love to watch you play. She actually I love to play would be like, that should be her Instagram handle. I just love to play bikes.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah, in the U23 field, as Canadians here, we have to, shout out the Canadians in general, but like Isabella Holmgren, two wins, just fantastic weekend for her. Great start to the season. Just so exciting. Like I've known her since she was, you know, 13 and she was at when we launched Shred Girls book 1, Lindsay's Joyride. She was, at the launch party as just like a young teen hanging out, and to see how far she's come is just so cool. So exciting every time.
Her parents were the wedding photographers for my sister's wedding. So they've been married for over 10 years. So I've known them for quite a while. Like what a small world connection, right?
I love that Rob Holmgren is a wedding photographer. Like this is one of those very niche things, but if you know him, it's a hilarious thing.
Well, and actually we have Izzy and Ava giant cyclocross heads in our basement. So we have like a fangirl area where I've got like some of my like original like large checks that I've won and big cards that people have given me, and Ava and Isabel's heads.
There's just something about winning a giant check. I only have one and I will never throw it out. It's
Right?
just like the best feeling in the entire universe.
We should like message Evie Richards and be like, hey, did you get a giant check? And if you did, can you post it? Because like I think you would have fun posting that.
Yeah. Okay. That actually leads to, I don't know if you saw sort of within the mountain bike world, there is a bit of, I'm going to call this very low level drama of a bunch of the top mountain bikers signed this petition because they're no longer doing the wide angle podium on the coverage. So, wide angle podium, for anyone that doesn't know, it's when you do up to fifth place on your podium. Now they're just doing the top three. So, a lot of the mountain bikers are saying that, mountain biking is a different sport than other sports. Like, it's often done the wide angle podium, and it allows those fourth and fifth place riders to get that little bit of extra recognition that you know might be good for their sponsors. Now I'm kind of mixed feelings on it, to be totally honest. What's your vibe?
I wanted to go to all sports. To your point, right? I kind of look at it like, wow, what a flagship great idea that they've been doing. And instead of thinking, let's take this away, I'd really love to encourage other sports to adopt it. Why? Because there's that kid that's going to end up in fourth or fifth and never maybe make the podium, right? Like the traditional podium, as we call it. And all of a sudden they're recognized. And so, for me, it's like, yeah, it's cool about sponsors. And like, I think about the elites, but I think about it from a kid's perspective of like, oh, wait, someone who like has a surprise race that way, like the space is there. You're standing on second and third on the like on the ground. Like, why not?
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. And I mean, it does, you're right. Like, and there often are a lot of really interesting battles for fourth and fifth for sure. So that's also
Yeah.
like a pretty big part of it. And you're right. Like, I think that's a good middle ground between the everyone gets a trophy or just the top three. Like, maybe we extend it like a little more. So there is a little more chance that other people get on the podium, especially like, frankly, cycling is really bad for like, there tend to be a top three that like typically are on the podium. And then it actually does mix up under that. So, okay. I was not convinced. You've got me convinced that the wide angle podium for all sports is actually the way to go. I like it.
Adam Grant, think differently, think differently. Well, and so then Samara Maxwell, right? Sammy Maxwell ending up on the podium of the elite women's race. I mean, that was super cool. So she was a top rider in the U23. Her post race interview, like it was like an Evie Richards interview, right? Just so excited, so proud of herself. Man, she talked about managing the elements, but not in a way that was dismissive of them or suggesting that like that was going to be a limiting factor or negatively. Like, I need to work with this. Everybody's working with this. And so I know who I am as a human and how I can work with this in this race. And it was such a beautiful interview. Also, her arms, and I know you're not supposed to comment on the way people look, but I was like, oh my gosh, your arms are, oh, they're so strong and so gorgeous. Those are stronger arms.
I love that. Absolutely. Um, and then okay, I have to give like a little bit of like what's reverse kudos, like anti kudos. And I think he's probably already learned a lesson because I think a lot of people blasted him for it. But Chris Blevins, so in the short or in the men's cross country yesterday on Sunday, Specialized went 1, 2, 3. And Chris Blevins said something to the effect of like, it's the first time that a team has swept the podium. Oof, oof. Which a lot of people were very, very quick to point out, which I love, that that's sort of forgetting that time that Cliff Bar back in like it was 2010 or 2011, but probably the best mountain bike World Cup race that has ever happened in North America, Wyndham World Cup. It was Georgia Gould, Katarina Nash, and Catherine Pendrell, 1, 2, 3, and Georgia Gould was in the lead until she flatted with like a tenth of a lap to go, and she finished third. Like it was still a 1, 2, 3, but as like the American in the race, it was oof, like that was one of the most like my heart is racing talking about it. Like I was there, I was in the corner where she flatted, so I got to like see it happen, and I will never forget that. And I love that so many people pointed that out to Chris Blevins, especially on the heels of Tadej Pogacar a couple weeks ago pointing out that like no there was a woman world champion who won this race already. um so just maybe we just don't make sweeping generalizations before we like completely fact check. Now I recognize that Chris Blevins
Oh,
was probably like 8 years old when that race happened, so like he probably was not watching the Wyndham World Cup back then. He was probably, like watching Saturday morning cartoons. But this is why we just never want to make the blanket statement like that before we've quadruple checked that it hasn't happened before.
yeah. Well, and I'm sure he got just like all the vitriol of social media. But on the topic of world champions, both the world champions were on the podium in the Tour de Flanders. So I also need you to picture during the men's mountain bike Grand Slam track was on, which we'll come to in a second, me going up and down the stairs because I had them both on and there was like enough time between the events at Grand Slam track that I could like come up and watch the men's. And workout time is like dog playtime. My dog was so confused as to what was going on. But I also got up. I did not get up at 3:30 to watch the men's Tour of Flanders, but I did turn it on. I then switched to the women's when the women's came on. So basically, Sunday I spent the entire day watching television. So
I'm a little
love
worried about
so
the
that
stairs, by the way. The up and down the stairs. I have notes for you.
my quad. So I'm very careful. It's good. The range of motion, according to my surgeon, when I saw him this morning, is a good thing. I'm being very good. He also was very impressed with the healing. So I promise you, Molly. Yeah, I'm being a good human, being a good patient. Um, Finish in the women's race. The men's race was exciting because like Tade rode away from Michael Vanderpool, which Vanderpool they had that finish the week before. but the women, there were four of them. And Pauline Ferrand Prevot, PFP, okay, if she's already finishing second, like, oh my gosh, this woman is just figuring out road racing again. She is, oh, I was so great. Anyways, Lotto Kopecky won the sprint. PFP was second. Lippert was third. I don't know who Lippert is, which is terrible. And then I did not spell her name right, so I could pronounce it correctly. Cassia Doma was fourth.
I love it. Leon Lippert's been in the mix for a very long time. She's just,
Okay.
she's one of the wide angle girls, though, like where, if we spread out to the wide angle podium, we'd actually see a lot more of her. And she's more of like a stage winner versus a classics rider, I would say. So actually really
Okay.
impressive to see her in that mix for sure. And yeah, PFP, like I'm not even ever that surprised when PFP does something because of course she's gonna do amazing.
Great athlete, great person, like done so many great things for mountain bike and for gravel and now for road for sure. I mean, she's just, yeah. Okay, want to talk about Grand Slam track? I want to know what, like,
I
I
do.
want to know what gossip you've heard about Grand Slam track.
I've heard such minimal gossip. Don't forget, like I hear the cycling gossip, you hear the track
You know?
gossip.
So Grand Slam track is this new track meet that is sponsored and founded by Michael Johnson. So Michael Johnson is an American, and I think he was a 2 400 runner. I'm pretty, anyways. He wants to revive track and field and make it more exciting in North America again. It's got a pretty good vibe in Europe. And so he came up with this idea of Grand Slam track. And so there's 4 weekends: Kingston, Miami, Philadelphia, Los Angeles. And the idea is that athletes compete twice over the weekend. So there's 6 disciplines, from short sprints to long sprints, short hurdles, long hurdles, short distance, and long distance. And the winner of each slam gets $100,000. So it's paying people fairly. And then, so there's racers and there's challengers. And racers signed a contract. So on top of the prize winnings, and the minimum that you go home with is 12,000 US dollars for the weekend. So you get paid $2,000 to show up minimum, and you get paid $10,000 minimum to come in last place. So not in track and field, not a bad payout. Then you can win the slams overall. So there's points for the weekend. You can win a weekend. You can win overall. I don't know that this is going to save track. And that sounds mean, but it was in Kingston, Jamaica, which is just like the home of track and field, and the stands were empty. And I looked at the ticket prices, and they were quite expensive. You know, it was more expensive than Athlos. So Athlos was the first female forward track meet last year with a concert. So you got people who weren't necessarily involved with track there. I think the events were spread out too much. It was fun. It was definitely like fun to watch from home because I was doing other things, but I worry, like, it's a $12.6 million prize purse alone. Like, I don't know how sustainable that is. And so, cool, a little nervous.
That sounds really similar to the NCL, like the cycling league that got attempted a
Yeah.
couple years ago that I kind of want to say ended in a state of utter disrepair with a lot of angry stakeholders. It's a tough one. And I mean it's similar though, because like they were kind of almost trying it was crit racing, but they were kind of trying to do it in like almost a track style of racing where it was literally like race car tracks they were using in a lot of the cases. And yeah, I'm kind of it's a tricky one to like how do you make those things work? And I just don't know that I have a super good answer. Like I would never be like, oh, here's exactly what they're doing wrong. But sometimes I do wonder if the prize purse being high isn't really the thing that's going to actually like move the needle on making the racing get bigger. I think maybe it is more of like the spectacle and more on that side, right? Like if you don't have a stadium full of people, it's just never going to really take off. I don't know. Chicken or the
Well, and
egg?
it's storytelling to me. Well, yeah, well, egg. I'm with the egg. I don't know why. I'm not a vegetarian. But tell the stories, right? Like tell the story, like tell more stories about Nikki Hills. Like there are so many stories that you can tell about them, right? So many ways that people can see themselves in Nikki. They're not telling those stories.
You know what? That's actually very true of track. And I'm sort of surprised that no one has really managed to capitalize on this because it's funny. In cycling, there's like every cycling outlet is sort of a combination of like how to be a cyclist, but also here's some pro cycling stuff. And running, there's just track kind of always gets put in this side bucket that doesn't really get covered by any really major running publications, even though like, I've talked to, I don't know if you know Carla Delgrand, like the Ontario-based Canadian Masters woman. She's in her, I think, apologies, Carla, if you're in your 70s. I think she's in her early 80s now. And she's still crushing like world records and stuff like that. And she's such a huge proponent of getting masters on the track because it's actually a pretty accessible type of racing for you to do as you get older. It's actually kind of a great way to keep running as you get older in a way that's actually more longevity and fitness oriented, I would argue, compared to
Agreed.
marathons and ultra running, which I love, but I don't think are the best thing for as we get older. I think actually sprinting is probably the better one for like long-term health.
200 meters, here I come. That's right. This is going to be my new event. And it's funny. I was thinking, Carl is a friend of mine, and she's been, someone I've been thinking about through this injury process of like, when I come back, like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, I want to have that connection to masters athletes. Like, I don't know if I'm ever going to run as an elite again, but if I look long term to like, what does running actually mean to me? It means community. It means connecting with people. And so like that part I'm really excited about. And if it's running a 200 at Masters Championships, oh, heck yes. Like I'm all in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think and the community aspect of that is actually, I'd say, greater in the track because you do actually have more time, versus marathon, half marathon, 10K, whatever, where you're just running the entire time. And maybe you stick around for a beer or something at the end, but you're not really hanging out with the other people. Whereas the track, I think, has more of a, well, you're there. You might as well chat with people. Yeah.
Well, and kids, right? Like I think about Grand Slam. How do we get kids there? Coloring pages and like those opportunities to take pictures and videos and all that other stuff. So, okay, so who does do that well? March Madness.
I was just gonna say March
Madness wrapped up. It wrapped up. One of so UConn won. It was awesome, right? So they defeated the University of South Carolina, who won last year and who'd had a bit of like up and down season for sure. Paige Buchers just had a great kind of like, I'm not gonna say like fairy tale season, but had an awesome season. From what I read in the media today, it was how she held herself after the game to celebrate. Like she was such a positive, I don't want to say like, she was just like this beacon of athlete hope of like, this is what we all want boys and girls to be when they win. But the game time was tough for me. I didn't get to watch it. Do you know why? What time was it on?
Ooh.
3 p.m., which was right when Grand Slam track started, right as the mountain bike was like going on. But the Athletic, which is this great, I think it's great. I mean, it's a little bit male dominated coverage, but it's part of the New York Times. Someone wrote a great piece about how important it is to put women's sport, especially with the growth it has, during primetime television.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, now here's my question. Do you feel like March Madness this year? I think I don't really know where the numbers were. I would say I, as someone who's not really at all into basketball, saw less about it this year because I feel as though on the women's side last year, Caitlin Clark and Angel, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her last name, they were making the headlines because of sort of this like bit of a back and forth kind of rivalry that they had. And I feel like I'm kind of sad that I didn't see that kind of stuff really making it into more of like the mass media that I generally consume. And it kind of makes me sad that like that's the way that mass media will cover women's sports is only if there is like more of this controversial lens that we can take it, right? Where you're like, oh, Paige was such a great competitor and like gave these lovely interviews. Like I did not see a single thing about that because it was just good sportsman, like this is great, done, cut, set, print. And I don't know that I have like a, what should happen with that, but just wanted to kind of call out that it made more headlines when there was more drama, and I find that very irritating. Just my just my 2 cents.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. Like it's such like why do we have to create drama? And I guess it's clickbait, like we live in a clickbait world, but how do we go back to telling those great stories and it's how do we get those stories to the youth, and it's actually what they demand. And so putting those stories back into, which is why we talk about it in this way.
Exactly. But okay, we are here today to talk about youth in sport, specifically sport and play. and how that is a human right. And before we started recording, I was saying, I feel like this is one of those things where if you think about blue cars, you start seeing blue cars. I've been thinking a lot about the intersections of gender equity and climate change and sport and access to, all different, whether it's food, clothing, shelter, like clean water, all of that stuff. And the more I think about it, the more I feel like I'm a conspiracy theorist who has like the big board with all of the threads and the red yarn that's connecting all of this stuff together. And I realize I am clearly not the first person to put all these together, but I am thinking about it in a lens that I never thought about it before, which is funny as someone who is kind of on the like socialist, anarchist, like punk rock, like teen side of things, and then got into sport and just was like, oh, well, clearly that's behind me now. um, I'm just a regular run-of-the-mill liberal now. And now I'm like, oh, it's all connected. So I might be actually back to being just like a
Okay, punk
socialist
rock
or something.
side tangent. No, not at all. Punk rock tangent. Distillers. Have you heard of the Distillers?
I have, yes.
They were in a great Jeremy Shepherd, who I talked about earlier. He used them in a great video where he was showing a whole bunch of slope style stuff last week. Anyways, okay. And I would like to make slope style, right, sport a human right. I think one of the things I've been reflecting upon, and it's interesting you bring this up, and we didn't talk about this earlier, is this idea of like we talked about a little like this siloing, right? It's almost like we're trying to silo things because we're getting things to compete against each other. And so, when you think about, I just did an interview with the Center for Human Rights in Sport. And so when you think about sport as a human right, I think the best thing that we can do is unsilo things and like find the red yarn connections and like think about collaboration so that sport can become a human right again. One of the things we talked about before we jumped on this was, teasing out sport and physical activity, right? And the conflation between those terms. And, sport is this like it's challenging yourself. I was reading the draft of the Canadian sport policy, which is now in limbo again because we're in caretaker convention in the lead up to the election on April 28th. But that we have to tease out sport, physical activity, and recreation. And sport is this idea of how we challenge ourselves, right? It's not about being on the podium. It's not even necessarily about entering in an event, but it is about this idea of how we challenge ourselves. Where physical activity, which is very much what I am doing, and I'm only doing physical activity in my recovery. There is no challenging my muscles. Walking around the block. And then recreation is, walking through the forest.
I feel like for you, that is challenging yourself because it's a challenge to do.
Oh, yeah, you're
So it might still be
less.
sport for you at this point. I don't know. But yes, I absolutely agree. And even that's something that's shifted to how I look at Strong Girl Publishing, how I look at the books we're putting out. And it's just kind of that ensuring that, like, that was how I felt with the Shred Girl series, ensuring that girls understood that they don't necessarily need to do a sport to find a movement that feels good for them. Like, and it shouldn't, like, there's a reason that most of my characters don't do school sports, or at least don't do team sports or traditional team sports. And it's because I think they're great, but they're not really my vibe. We have other authors who are doing that in their books, which is great. But I think it's just important for, girls, kids in general to understand that, yeah, there's a whole spectrum of what movement and physical activity can mean, from, being Isabella Holmgren and competing at world championships at, 18 years old, 17 years old, to, just, yeah, going for a walk around the block with your dog, but it's your routine that you do most days. So you are getting in the movement that you need to do, or that you should be doing in order to be a healthy, happy human. So, this kind of comes to all of these points. Aspen Institute's Project Play initiative has come out with the Children's Bill of Rights in Sports. Do you want to talk through them? Is that where we should start, or do you want to go back to Norway?
I mean, I have to go back to Norway. I have to give them credit. So they've been doing this since 1976, right? They have put sport as a human right, but as a child's right. And so they have this framework for 12 and under. I always put this caveat when I talk to people about Norway. Norway is also one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And so like I recognize the privilege and the ability to do this. But to say there is something to be learned from it. In Norway, 93% of kids participate in one sport every season. Like that's That's amazing. And I look at it here and I go, okay, how do we get like kids to be able to do that? And I was about to say students because I really think school is the gateway to sport. I am currently writing something on that right now, but they came up. So their acronym is the NIF, but it is the Norwegian Olympic and Paralympic Committee and the Confederation of Sport. Because the acronym is NIF. Don't know how you get there. It for sure is in Norwegian, right? Like a language neither one of us speak. But their children's right in sport, the provision of children in sport, it's the foundation for how I've said North Americanized it. As I was talking, as part of my FIFA Center for Human Rights ambassador interview just a few minutes ago before we met. And so it gives us an ability to think about this through a North American lens where things are a little bit different, right? We have these strong urban centers, but they make it more expensive for kids to access sport. There are fewer fields. There is more traffic. I grew up, I didn't get to play team sports because in no world could my parents do that. Like there was no one to drive us. And, at 6, you're not taking the subway. And because my parents couldn't carpool, no one would help us. Right. So, I don't really have the kids team sport thing, but I love what Norway's done. And, yes. So one of the things people are like, oh, people in Norway don't keep score. They keep score, but then it doesn't carry over to influence the next game. There's no most valuable player. Everybody's a valuable player as they're developing. And so, I think it's why we see, a healthier society in Norway and why we also see people at the top of the podium. Ingebrigtsen is just still crushing it.
Well, I think it's funny because I think a few years ago, Norway sort of exploded in endurance sport in the research and in how people were talking about training and, the 80-20 and, zone 2 and all of this stuff. And Norway just kept getting cited over and over again. And I think actually what didn't get brought up was a lot of this fact that it doesn't even really matter as much how they're training at age 20. They're already 15 years ahead of, most a lot of Americans or a lot of North Americans who picked up sport later or came to, these sports, later in life. So it's just very interesting that we kind of didn't really mention this part. We just talked about the fact that they were doing a lot of endurance paced stuff and eating a lot of carbs. I don't know. But also started training
Probably
when they
some
were
fried
very
fish
young.
too.
Definitely some fried fish. Yeah, yeah. No, I love that.
When they were young.
Oh, true. Yeah, they were playing.
Right? I think they were playing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I love that you're mentioning, class and ability to get to the things. And, I'd say North America is really bad and has been really bad for years. I think it's just much more prevalent now, and we're seeing it a lot more now. It is expensive to be in sport in North America. It is very expensive to be in any kind of specialized sport. It is very expensive to be in any kind of sport that, requires any kind of equipment or any kind of added coaching of any type. It's funny you're going to mention True Sport Canada. I actually read a lot for True Sport US. And a lot of what we talk about now is actually the, class inequities and social inequities and how that can impact how kids are progressing through sport when, half the parents can pay for multi-sport camps in the summer and, specialized, personalized coaching and, the best equipment, the best everything. And then other parents are sort of shamed for not buying their kid the organic Fruit Loops and just buying them the regular Fruit Loops instead. So again, this all
How did you know that was one of my favorite cereals? How did you know? Of course you know. Toucan Sam. Oh, delicious.
Delicious. Absolutely delicious. Yeah, so it's just very funny how interconnected all of this is. And it's also funny to me looking back. I always talk about how I wasn't athletic as a kid and just was not into sports, blah, blah, blah. The reality is, if I actually look back, I remember asking my parents for karate lessons, stuff like that, and they couldn't afford it. So I didn't do it. And there just wasn't access to other stuff that I could do that I was interested in. So, again, this is one of those, you actually look back at this stuff and you're like, oh, how many kids actually didn't get to do the sport because they were priced out of it? And then just kind of turned it into I hate to say a personality, but like my personality was I don't like sports because
Right.
that's sort of like a
Yeah.
defense mechanism, right? Like you don't want to admit to your friends that your parents can't afford something because that's kind of embarrassing when you're a kid. So instead, you're like, oh, I didn't want to play anyway.
Yeah. Yes. Right. That's the protectionist measure, and as you should do, because there's nothing worse than being teased at school. Nothing worse than being teased at school. Linda Flanagan writes about this a lot. Um, in magazines and her book, it's fantastic. I'll put the links in the show notes for sure. And I think we should probably interview her. She has done extensive research in that. But if you go back to the Aspen Institute, their values, they're not principles. True Sport has principles, Aspen Institute has values. But this idea of being able to play sports is how it starts, and to enjoy themselves. No athlete develops and becomes the tippy top of anything if they quit, right? Like Raul and I talk about this all the time. Do you want to raise the best athlete in the world? You just want them to come back. Do you want them to come back? To have them come back? Do you know what you need to do? You need to have fun, right? Like it's actually really simple.
Oh, I love it. Just enjoyment, just being part of the conversation. Like, how do we miss that?
It's very easy because we get wrapped up in the wrong things, right? I'm looking at the True Sport principles, right? And the first one is go for it. The first one should be keep it fun. Always. Just keep it fun. Then go for it. Right? I really think we've kind of lost our way. And you know what? Going back to Grand Slam and watching all of those people compete this weekend, they had so much fun. And reflecting back now, that's why I loved watching it. I loved watching the competitors have fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, do we want to walk through the project play like Children's Bill of Rights, a couple or even a couple of them that you're particularly into? What do you think?
I mean, I think, well, let me ask you this. I mean, I can tell you what my favorite ones are. What's your favorite one that we could talk about?
Ooh, I think actually because of who our audience is, I think number three, having qualified program leaders. So children have the right to play under the care of coaches and other adults who pass background checks and are trained in key competencies. That's actually huge to me. Background checks should kind of be like an obvious one, but the trained in key competencies is, I think, so important and a really difficult thing because on one hand, I'm like, well, if we lose volunteers because they don't have time to go to like a weekend training or to do, XYZ to get trained in these competencies, are we like missing out on people that could be in it? Flip side, though, I have seen a lot of coaches give a lot of really bad advice, well intentioned, but really bad, um, because they weren't trained in the stuff. They're just volunteer parents who, like, maybe ran cross country 25 years ago and are repeating things about fueling or, race day that were relevant 25 years or were what we thought worked 25 years ago, but we now know do not work. Um, so
Well, okay, rally report. I mean, this is one of the things that came out of the rally report too, right? Girls are asking for qualified coaches that they can see themselves in. I think, working in the Canadian coaching sort of pathway, one of the things though there's a couple things that I think are really missing, and they're all related. So I think developing the skills of critical thinking and reflection are missing. But really what's missing is how do we teach coaches to build rapport, right? Like how do we build those relationships? Because and also like my favorite thing coaching was, how old are the kids that you're coaching? Oh, they're 7. You have less than 7 seconds to get that skill across before their ears turn off. You'll have more seconds if you have a better relationship with the athletes. And so then I'd actually be like, you can probably find something on YouTube that will teach you that skill pretty quickly. I don't need you to necessarily do formal training, but I'd really love for you to work on how you're going to build the rapport and relationship skills with the athletes that you're working with. And those skills, as a parent, as a coach, as a leader, and everything, like that is a skill that will pay you dividends everywhere.
it's true. Yeah. That's why we always laugh when teachers have to go through cycling coaching training, where so much of the stuff that you go through in the NCCP coaching pathways is like how to teach and like how to coach. And often you're like, This teacher who's been working with fifth graders for the last 15 years, I think they're good on that. Could we maybe teach them some cornering drills now?
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah. And so meeting people where they're at, right?
exactly. Like we do need different coaching pathways, I think, where there actually is almost more of like, oh, you're a pro athlete, so you know how to do the skill. Now we need to teach you how to teach the skill. And then, oh, you already know how to teach. Okay, we just need to help you like figure out the skill and like how to break it down. So there almost needs to be two pathways, which I realize is asking a lot of our coaching programs. But I think, kids deserve the best of our coaching programs. So there is that. And I think
Actually, I don't think that's asking a lot to be just to kind of defend your aunt. I don't think that's asking a lot.
it's really actually almost just breaking it into two parts, and someone can breeze through part number one and then have to take time on part number two, or vice versa. So yeah, I actually, you know what? Yeah, I'm back to it. Okay, yeah, two parts. Also, the leadership part could really like go for how to teach part could be used for pretty much every sport. You wouldn't even have to have sport specific ones. That's really almost like a learn to coach module followed by the sport specific one. So there we go. We've just reinvented coaching education in North America. Got it.
I'll be sure to pass that along to the coaching association. I'll send an email after we connect today.
Yeah, I'm like, call us. We've got you.
I think the other one that stands out for me, and as you're talking about this, is number 7, to be treated with dignity.
Yes.
Right? Respect, dignity. Those psychologically safe spaces happen when we treat everybody, coaches, parents, athletes, with dignity. And okay, I'm just gonna laugh. Make America great again. If I wanted to make America great again, I just would like people to treat each other with dignity and kindness. That would make America amazing.
Coming back to kindness. We're making this t-shirt.
Yeah. So
It's true. And
your role in that.
I think we've come to a point, yeah, where the number, I think I can say this from the number of articles that I've been tasked to write for True Sport that are about how to handle an altercation with a referee, how to handle a parent who's, being disrespectful of everyone in the stands, like how to handle conflict with a coach. So much of it comes back to we're in this place where a lot of people are no longer adhering to the basic principles of treating people with dignity, whether it is the coach, the kid, the parent, the ref, etc. So yeah, the number of articles that have been assigned on it, I think, speaks to it being a major problem.
And writing articles is great. I think people actually just don't know what to do anymore. And I think, like when I see the future of True Sport, True Sport's in a little bit of limbo in Canada as it's been left, with CCS, and CCS needs to be third party and independent as it adopts the Canadian Safe Sport program. Wholeheartedly agree with it, celebrating CCS and their move. But what an awesome opportunity with the True Sport principles to revisit them and to think about, we have all of this amazing work that you've done. Now, how do I make it into an action, right? Like this. So this is like my heart and soul of what I like to do, right? This like knowledge translation piece. And I really want to work with kids and adults and figure out like what do you need that will make sport better? Like how can I bring you something? Like what tools do you need? I'm here for you.
Yes, absolutely. And on the what tools do you need, I do want to kind of jump ahead before we talk for another 18 hours, as we tend to do, are pillars of performance. And I saw your 5 here and I literally immediately highlighted them, put them in an Evernote for myself. So I've stolen your 5 pillars of performance. I am adopting them. They are mine now. Um,
We're a team. We share them. So
okay.
like, yes.
Yeah. And I think, I want to go through these because I think these are fantastic, whether you're listening as a parent, a coach, an athlete yourself, a young athlete. I think these are relevant and important. And I love that number 1 is sleep soundly. Because I woke up this morning after like a 9.5 hour night of sleep. And I was like, I might just be someone who needs 9.5 hours of sleep every night. This is just who I am as a person. It is what it is.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah, me too. Hands up, me too. Anyone else? Hands up. You can raise your hand in the car, whatever you're listening. Raise your hand. I need that much sleep.
I genuinely think that might actually be like one of those things if you actually started looking at all elite athletes and getting them to say like what's sort of their like best amount of sleep. I bet you most women in particular, because I know women do tend to need a little more sleep than men. I bet you most of us would be in the 9.5 hour range for like what makes us truly happy.
Amy Bender's research actually confirms that. So yes, it's 9.5 hours. So you have to be in bed for 10 to 10 and a half, depending on what your getting out of bed routine is like. Mine is like, oh my gosh, I have to pee. I'm getting out of bed right now. And your fall asleep routine. And sometimes I read 3 pages. Actually, sometimes I read 3 words and I'm asleep. Sometimes I read 120 pages. It just depends on the day.
And the book.
It's yeah, you're not wrong. Okay, good point. You make a really good point.
You're like, oh, just one more chapter, just one more chapter. I'm like falling asleep. I'm just like, oh, I need to know. I need to know. That's why I try to read nonfiction before bed for the most part, because fiction, I will sometimes accidentally get down a pretty extreme, I need to know what happens next rabbit hole. Um,
Oh my gosh, we're so opposites that way. So I'm in the nonfiction book, like, oh, I need to know the research. So I need to be like, I have my iPad going and my computer going, and I'm like looking up all these different things. Fiction gets me into like this like great dreamlike state. I can't read scary books because then I dream about them. And Raw was like, you have to stop waking me up because you're afraid. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love it. I love it. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, you win the nerd battle there because I am definitely not sitting up with like dual screens trying to check the research before I go to sleep. Um, but yes, Dr. Amy Bender, fantastic. She like look up her. We have to get her on the podcast, but I've had her on the Consummate Athlete before. Maybe we can include a link to that in the show notes, talking all things sleep. She's fantastic. I did not realize that you were part of one of her studies. That is hilarious.
So they thought I was delusional. So I just like, how is your quality of sleep? And I was like, hi, do you nap? I was like, no, I only nap when I feel to. I feel like I get enough sleep at night and like all these things. And they were like, this woman is delusional. And then they got my sleep data and they were like, oh my God, I think I scored a 99 and I had one bad night of sleep. And it wasn't even that bad. It was the night before Canadian Championships where I was like, I ended up winning. And I was just like nervous about it. And then like in my log, I was like, oh, this best night of sleep. I was a little bit nervous for the race. And then the night after, I think I was like, I had a few celebratory drinks. And so, again, not my best night of sleep. And so, I just remember that post interview. She's like, can we be friends? Like, you are, like, this is your superpower. Can we please be friends? So that was the start of our friendship.
I love that. I love that. Also, Amy, if you're looking for more friends, I'm also a really good sleeper. So just putting it out there. Just picturing like friendship bracelets that are all just like really good sleeper, like 9.5 hours or
Oh,
something. There we go.
imagine you just wear like your time, right? Like I used to wear a necklace with like the time I wanted to run to qualify for the Olympics for the 1500. But now I'm just going to wear like my sleep hours. Like I'm 9.5. You? How are you? Are you at 10? 8? Yeah. If you're a 7, I think you're lying.
I was just gonna be like 7, we're not friends.
No. And also, have you learned to like function on less sleep? So Matthew Walker, I love Matthew Walker is his ability to walk back and say, I was wrong in my thinking. Right. And I think that takes a really strong, really intelligent person. So Matthew Walker used to be like, you have to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time, never have alcohol, never have fun, basically like live like a monk effectively. It's like, oh my God, there's so much more to life. I've totally changed my tune on that. And I loved when Andrew Huberman, was like, oh, you say this and this. I'm like, yeah, I kind of changed my mind on that. Some of the research just showed me differently. And I think that really shows someone who's dedicated to their craft. So he talks about quality. So like, to your point about waking up this morning, you're like, oh, that was great. Like, I think we can measure quality. Larissa Mills, who we'll have on the podcast, she talks about having a relationship with social media. Like, if you can look at it and go into a dreamlike sleep, great. But most people can't. So, like, ditch your phone. Quantity, I think we've now hammered quantity. But I would say to the parents out there, your kids probably need 10 to 12 hours of sleep.
Okay, that's
And
something that gets missed all the time. And I actually didn't know this
all the
till,
time.
again, shockingly, I was working on an article for True Sport about sleep. And I was so kerfuffled when it was like, oh, teens actually need a ton of sleep. And I was like, oh, so all of this time that we've like called teens lazy for sleeping in on the weekends or like any of that stuff, you're just like, oh no, biologically, they're just screwed from the week before. They are exhausted. Of course they're sleeping in.
and let them, right? Like that is where deep learning happens, right? That's where all the gains from sport, physical activity, recreation happen. Like that is where all of the magic stuff happens. And so Stefan Underwood, and actually I would go back and challenge him on this. He said like adults need regularity. And I'm kind of like, if your body's telling you to sleep and you sleep in a little bit later than like you normally get up, I'm like, I think that's better than like sticking to this idea of regularity.
Could not agree more. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm very lucky in that we don't need to set an alarm most of the time because generally speaking, we can get up ahead of 7 and it's fine. And we do. And it's great. Some days we're up at 6, some days we're up at 7. Um, but yeah, like having that kind of just like wake up at, wake up in that period is fantastic. And I think, that's something that most people can work for. I know kids wake people up. I realize there's like plenty of reasons someone has to put an alarm on. And we have alarm days where it's like, oh, we need to be up by 6:15 to get out. But for the most part, like if you can kind of train yourself to wake up in like an hour range and maybe have your like alarm for like kind of your, okay, you need to be out of bed now, but try to wake up ahead of it. I think that's probably your optimal.
Couldn't agree more. Like you summarized it so well there. And then just the last one is timing, right? Like I think you need to figure out if you're a night owl or a morning lark or if you fall somewhere in between. Like I'm definitely a morning lark. Like I love working first thing in the morning. Like that is my favorite time. I don't like running because I need to fuel because I'm a female and I need energy to do that. Which leads into feed the machine, which is the second one. But you know, self-awareness, like figure out what you need with your sleep. I think, if you're not aware, keep a sleep journal. Have you ever kept a sleep journal?
I have, yeah. I've also, I admit, tried sort of like all of the different wearables, the Aura, the Whoop, all of them, and I don't have an issue with them. They're just not really my jam. I find actually on the note of, quality, I find sleep tracking actually makes my quality go down because I get kind of obsessive about it. That's that new thing, orthosomnia. So now we're just like obsessed with how we're sleeping, and our goal of sleeping better actually ends up making us sleep worse because then you're like waking up and you're like, oh my God, I need to go back to bed right now because I'm ruining my sleep score. Everything is ruined. Tomorrow is going to be terrible, et cetera, et cetera. I would say I'm sort of one of those like in-betweener people though. I'm more of like a late morning person, so I'm definitely not really your classic morning lark or night owl. I'm just kind of in the middle, which I think is where most people fall.
Totally. And then just on the sleep trackers, if you are an active sleeper, none of those sleep trackers work because they're mostly based on if you're moving in your sleep.
Yep.
And some nights I don't move, and some nights, last night in particular, I really was dreaming. I had kind of finished two books over the weekend, so like there were so many different things that I was dreaming about. I was active last night, but I'm not wearing anything. I slept great.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, next one, Feed the Machine. And we will, of course, have Stronger Publishing's newest author, Stevie Lynn Smith, registered dietitian, on to talk more and more about this as we work through her upcoming book, Power Up. So when we have that ready for pre-order, we will definitely have her on to answer all of the fueling questions, especially where they apply to young women athletes in particular. But I do think this is, yeah, clearly very important. And as Stevie likes to say, as training goes up, eating goes up. I think is like
Oh, I love
moral of the
that.
story. Yeah.
Oh, well, and I guess that would be for me in this injury. And Stevie's been really helpful, right? So it's balancing. She's like, you still have to get your carbs, but you have to be really thoughtful about the carbs that you're getting so that you get the balance of micronutrients. She's been just such a like awesome support through this. And then protein, right? Like, and you need to have protein, carbohydrate, and fat, right? Like they all work together. And I think one of the like best things that I've learned about protein is this like idea of synthesis, and you have to have the good fats in you to actually synthesize and use the proteins that you're using. And so I've really made an effort through this recovery to eat nuts and seeds so I drink olive oil out of the bottle. Raw's like, don't you just drink maple syrup out of the bottle? I'm like, no, I now drink our like rented olive oil tree out of the bottle, alongside the proteins that I'm trying to get into me every day.
Oh, I love that. I love that you've traded, yeah, shots of maple syrup for shots of olive oil.
Oh, when I go back to training, I'm going to be doing shots of maple syrup again. I just, I don't need that extra, 40 grams of carbohydrate as I step
Hmm.
out the door.
I
Which brings us
love,
to one of our,
I love maple syrup. Side note, like as fuel for training, like a little bit of maple syrup in a flask with a little bit of salt is just chef's kiss fantastic.
Well, and so then great point about talking about kids and fueling kids, right? Like your weight, like if you've got a kid that's got like a ton of, matches or whatever, feed them maple syrup. Like don't feed them that highly processed. And there is a place for that in adults, but in kids, what we really need to instill is like eating real food. And so, Project Orange Slice, right? This like brainchild that I have, right? Get your kids to be sitting around with other kids at the end of a practice, eating some orange slices and some nuts or some chocolate milk or bread and peanut butter or apple and peanut butter, but like not butter. I should say not butter. You don't have to eat peanut butter. I just am obsessed with Adam's peanut butter right now, which is why it's top of mind. But eating real food and getting them to reach for those real foods.
And I think that's also important, even coming back to how it's all interconnected. Those real foods are also much more inexpensive, much more accessible
Mm-hmm.
than a lot of the, fancier sport stuff that you're right, like we're not saying it doesn't have a place for adult or even like young adult athletes, depending on the level they're at. But I think especially as kids and young teens, like the more you can focus on the real foods, the better it is for like the long term in terms of just like now they actually have a palate for it. Now they don't reach for the bar or the protein shake automatically. Um, but also it doesn't create this like class divide between the kids who can bring the fancy protein shake with them versus the kid that's, has the chocolate milk because his parents are like, I'm not spending $60 on this bag of protein powder. Are you insane? Um,
Yeah. And I think there was a great, and like Jen Saigo, who's a friend of mine, great sports dietitian, a few years, not a few, almost 10 years ago now, they were at a nutrition conference and they're like, oh, we'll separate the whey and the casein and then we'll combine them again. And she was like, so milk. So just drink
if it sounds
milk
like
or
a,
chocolate
yeah,
milk.
if it
Yeah.
sounds like a duck and it walks like a duck, might be a duck,
On
might be
the topic
chocolate
of
milk.
milks, a chocolate milk duck. But um, right? I just like have to always draw like everyone's like, oh, I had almond milk. I'm like, well, there's no protein in that. Like I understand that almonds might have some protein in, but in the chemical process of whatever they do to make almond milk, which hates my stomach for the record, it is there's no protein in it. And so actually being conscious about the protein that's in it. And so it's all on the nutrition labels, right? And I think it's that young girls like going into puberty need a minimum of 50 grams of protein a day.
Which doesn't sound like a ridiculous amount, but it actually is pretty hard to get, especially if you are, not someone who loves a wide variety of food and is eating kind of more of your standard, the sad typical American diet, standard American diet, whatever. Um, it's pretty easy to not hit that number. So you do actually need to pay pretty close
Totally.
attention.
Hmm. Now, interestingly enough, we talked about Fruit Loops. They actually have added iron to them. But Fruit Loops with 2% milk, great recovery snack, great breakfast, right? 125 a cup of milk, cup of 2% milk, great protein, great calcium, and you get a little bit of those sugars. And if your kid likes sugar cereal, not the worst thing.
No, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, realistically, it's one of those funny things. Like I said here, in Ojai, it's very like we're still in like the kombucha and like acai bowl is like the, bastion of health. It is very funny how we've kind of thought of granola as being the health food and like Fruit Loops as being absolutely evil. But if you actually look at like the serving your kid would put of granola in a bowl versus Fruit Loops, you actually are probably quadrupling your sugar with the granola. And like it might
Mm-hmm.
be more natural sugars. It might be more natural sugars, but
Maybe.
maybe like not even a guarantee.
Fruit,
Anyway.
Fruit
More
Loops are delicious. I'm not going to lie.
exactly. All right. Yeah. More of that coming with Stevie as we get that book underway. Let's just quick hit your last three here. We have be intentional, get moving, and engineer excellence. Talk me through those three very quickly here.
Sure. So being intentional is this idea of knowing who you are and being very present with what you're doing. So for me, as I was coming up with these things, it was don't ask why 400 is my favorite workout. but it was thinking about going into my 400 workout and just thinking about being in the 400 and not thinking about the other things that I had to do. Right. And so being very intentional with what I was doing. And I often get asked, like, how do you, and actually, you asked me this the other week, like the other day, like, how many different things are you doing? And it's because I'm intentional. Like, when I sit down to do this podcast with you, Molly, and when I do the show notes, I am like deep and dedicated and intentionally in doing that with you. And then you're not spread thin. And it's so much fun, more fun this way.
Could not agree more. And actually, I wanted to highlight the be intentional because I authenticity is a huge buzzword right now. But I actually really like the idea of being intentional versus authentic because I think intentional is still very much it's values driven. It's keeping with your integrity, but it's still doing the thing that you need to do because I think sometimes authenticity is used to maybe skip out on doing something or not give it your best because you're not authentically feeling it. And I'm using like little air quotes here. Or, saying something that might be kind of hurtful to someone because you're just being authentic to yourself. But I think being intentional would then like, you'd run through whatever you wanted to say to that person. Your intentionality would be like, okay, but kindness is my number one thing. So, do I say anything or do I temper it with something kind or, just not say anything at all. So I think, yeah, to me, be intentional is so much more relevant than being authentic. It's a similar thing, but I think it just adds that level of integrity and like the value system and like doing what you said you were going to do. Right? Like you could authentically show up to the 400 workout and be like, I authentically do not want to do this right now. So I authentically am going to do terrible at this. Or you can show up and be like, okay, my value is that I'm gonna, I give it my all in workouts, so I am going to be intentional about this. Yeah, that's my little authentic rant.
Oh, I love it. That was, oh my gosh, thank you for that. That was really special. I really thank you for that.
I love it. I love it. Be intentional is my favorite on there. And then yeah, okay. Get moving. I think as we've said, right to play, right to sport. We love finding our ways to move, even when we are not supposed to be moving so much. And we are doing a good job of only walking on our treadmill instead of running. Yay, Sasha.
And I sit on my box. So my box step is now my like seating area because it like is the perfect height for my feet. So then my quads don't engage and I'm not using my knee at all. And I can do all my arm weights.
Nice. Are you actually finding like you're doing more like better with your arms? Because so I actually was making fun of my husband Peter the other day because I saw him sitting on a park bench doing his like overhead presses and I was like, "What are you doing, you weirdo?" And he's like, "Oh, it's harder this way because you can't really engage your core as much. You can't really use your like legs to kind of like, push up." So you're
I would argue on
actually
the core.
mm. But yeah, so like you're actually like working your arms way more when your whole body can't work as like a chain. And I was like, "Oh, you're full of crap." And then I tried it and I was like, "Oh, you're not full of crap at all. You're actually entirely correct." So you're probably doing really good stuff for your upper body right now.
Well, be intentional. So I've always been intentional lifting to like really think about how I'm moving. So when you're sitting, right, yoga, you think about like sucking your button back to engage your core. You will forever thank me the next time you sit on a bench. You'll be like, oh yeah, I've got access to my core again. I got this, no problem.
I hate that, but I love you. So I will try it. I'm very upset about this. My core
Right.
does
Well, but
not
this is
appreciate
engineering
this.
excellence. Right?
Well,
Like this is the engineering excellence, right? Like I want to lift properly. To do that, I need to engage my core. I got to figure out how to do that sitting on a bench, suck my belly button in.
yeah. And I mean, as an engineer, I guess this last one makes perfect sense for you, but engineer excellence, clearly we can see how that plays out in strength training. You can see how it would play out in like a track meet. Talk to me about how it plays out in, as we were saying, all of the things when you're doing all of the different activities.
I think step one is actually you have to define excellence for yourself, right? I think we all have this idea of like what excellence feels like and what we think it should look like showing up. But like being intentional, authentic, you have to have your definition. Challenge yourself though, right? Don't say it like, please do not say that excellence is wiping your hands on the couch after you eat a donut.
We're not supposed to do that.
Oh, you can sometimes, just not all the time. That's just not excellence. That's just like that's the daily.
As I
Oh,
hold my
can't wait
like
to hear what kind of.
bag of donuts on my couch as we're recording.
But so then setting your definition, but to work towards it, right? Like the reason I like engineering and an engineering design cycle over the scientific method is the scientific method is binary. You test a hypothesis and it's true, false, yes, no. But the engineering design cycle is it's an opportunity to explore. And so you're exploring what excellence means to you, and you're in effect kind of increasing that threshold, and you're playing, and you get to see a different version of yourself that you may not even have thought was possible.
I love it. Love it, love it, love it. We may need to do a whole episode that is like scientific method versus engineering
Mm,
principles. I would
mm.
love that because I think whether it's doing homework, doing like a report for work, planning your like workout and training schedule, all of that, I think that can all go through both of those lenses. And I really like, I'm such a productivity, like getting things done kind of nerd. So like my brain is loving this. All right. Well, I think we should wrap up there. This was such a fun conversation. So many different pathways that all kind of like get back to my conspiracy theory. We all come back to, sport and play being a human right. All of this being so interconnected. We can't have good sport without good sleep, good food, all of the things. Yeah, absolutely love it. If you're loving the show, do us a favor, rate, review, subscribe. It's available on all of the podcast platforms. We so deeply would appreciate the quick little 5-star reviews there. You can find the links to everything we mentioned in the show notes. You can find me at Molly J. Herford and at Strong Girl Publishing, and you can find Sasha at S Gaulish Runs and yellow_running_shoes. Did I get that? Nailed it.
Well done.
Amazing. All right. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We will catch you next week. Happy training, and we'll talk to you soon.